Bhante, sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu Bhante,
Who is that saying sadhu?
Right?
Sadhu Bhante.
Prashant.
Yes, Bhante. Yes.
Namaste, Ji Bhante.
Namaste. I can't see everybody who is out of the ether, so I don't know all the people who are there.
Ja, das, naja,
So,
das ist very
Was? Mit
so.
Licht.
and hello, everybody. Nice to meet you again.
Yeah. Hello.
Who is that speaking?
It was me, Monica from Bavaria.
Moni. Nimbu. Yeah.
Now I get my phone off.
Okay, we're going to start soon by reciting the Namo Tassa 3 times. So why don't you all, I guess Prashant will mute everybody and you can chant on your own there. You can chant along with me. Namo.
Just a second. This way.
Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa
Bhagavato
Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. So welcome all of our international friends to this Sunday's Dhamma talk. And what we covered before the Wesak talk 2 Sundays ago, we were talking about the right view, and we were talking about also the 5 aggregates, and I wanted to go into that a little bit more. But today I want to speak more about the 3 characteristics of the 5 aggregates, or the cornerstone of the Buddhist teaching about anicca, dukkha, and anatta, and how we can meditate to try to understand them at a deeper level. Now, we talked about the right view also in the Sutta study classes, about the different aspects of right view, meaning understanding the 4 Noble Truths, and understanding, what is wholesome, what is unwholesome, and so on. But really the cornerstone of the wisdom is understanding the 3 characteristics of anicca, dukkha, anatta, or impermanence, suffering, and no self. Now, these are really the focus of vipassana meditation, the focus of developing the 4 foundations of mindfulness and vipassana meditation. But first of all, we have to understand that there's 2 levels of the Dhamma. There's the external level of Dhamma, and could say, the internal level of Dhamma, or especially with impermanence. There's the external impermanence and internal impermanence. And the same with dukkha, external suffering and internal suffering. And even with anatta, external anatta and internal anatta. And we understand these through the three levels of right understanding or right view, which is sort of the intellectual level. We can understand impermanence, suffering, and no self on an intellectual level. But then it requires reflection and meditation to begin to really understand them, especially the internal levels of these Dhammas. So we can understand the external level through intellectual understanding and through thinking about it, but only through the practice of meditation can we really understand anicca, dukkha, and anatta on the internal level, because that's the real level. It's only the internal level, that means in our mind, that we can actually change and purify the mind, and to purify or weaken the roots of the internal suffering. We can't do a whole lot about external suffering, but most of the practice of the Dhamma is in learning how to reduce and overcome the mental suffering. Now, so, and I wanted to mention the mudra. If you can see the Buddha image behind me, he has his hands in what is called the Dhamma Chakra Mudra, which basically has the three fingers up, and the index and thumb fingers are making like a circle. And the other hand with the finger pointing to this, it basically means look at this. And these three fingers, now different teachers or different traditions, in yoga they'll actually call this mudra something else. The chin mudra has a different meaning. But these three fingers, the way that I like to interpret them, stands for anicca, dukkha, and anatta. That means that all the conditioned phenomenon of this world, the external world as well as the internal world of the mind, is in a constant state of flux and change. That means impermanence, a continual state of change. And the other finger represents the dukkha, or that because everything is changing, nothing can be considered stable, nothing can really be considered a source of any permanent or lasting happiness, because it's always changing. And the third finger means there's no one to control it. That means they're anatta. And there's two different meanings of anatta. I'll try to explain a little bit later. But basically, everything is impermanent. Because they're impermanent, they're not a source of happiness. They're a source of frustration when we try to hold on to them, or we have aversion to them, but they keep coming at us because there's ultimately no one to control them. And so that's just a very brief meaning of the anicca, dukkha, and anatta. And we'll be talking a little bit more about those. And the anicca, dukkha, and anatta is a unique teaching of the Buddha's wisdom, especially the anatta, because most of the other teachings of the day were based on atta, or self. And the Buddha was the first person to really talk about anatta. And so, but anicca, dukkha, and anatta are a gradual way of developing wisdom. In other words, impermanence is the easiest thing to see, and especially the external impermanence. So we can look around us and we know how basically everything is changing, let's say, especially these bodies. So the first object of our attention is the mindfulness of the body, to see how the body is always changing. Now, if you look at the body from the outside, it looks like something solid. And if you grab a hold of your arm, you feel something solid there, or you step on a scale and the body weighs 100 or more pounds. And so, it looks like it's something solid, and it doesn't look like it's changing very much. Maybe over a few years, you see some changes as a baby grows older, and then as an old, once middle age, and then the person starts changing again in the opposite direction. Things, decaying and so on. So we notice those changes. Or was subject to our health changes. We might be healthy for a while and sick again. So, and all the sickness and old age and death, that's the external impermanence that we can see, and everything around us too. People can build houses and they can be burned down or blown apart by hurricanes or so on. And so everything else, plants and trees and animals, they're born and die. So that's an external impermanence. Anybody can see that. It doesn't take rocket science. It doesn't take meditation to understand the level of the external impermanence. But if you, get under the skin, you'll see that if you analyze this body from a biological standpoint, that we know that this physical body is made up of trillions of cells, and even cells are made up of many millions of molecules and DNA, and you can keep breaking that down into atoms, and protons and neutrons, until finally quantum theory comes around and blows all that into nothingness. And so basically, and this body is changing. Every second, cells are being born and cells of the body are dying off. And not only that, in all the other forms of life too, there's this process of incessant change on the internal level, or just underneath the surface of the skin. And that's where the practice of the insight meditation and vipassana meditation begins its deeper level of understanding impermanence. And it's not only this physical body, but it's our mind also, that our thoughts are always changing. Basically, impermanence applies to the 5 aggregates of clinging. So the material forms, our feelings, the various sensations and the feelings of pleasure and painful and neutral feelings that are constantly changing. Perceptions, mental volitions, thoughts, emotions, ideas, wantings. The mind is in a constant process of, changing its mental states and its reactions and its thoughts, as you can easily see during meditation. So the process of, because everything is changing, we try to cling on to this, we try to find something that's stable in this process of change. And if we can't accept that change, we try to cling to it, then there becomes frustration. Because especially as I've already mentioned in quite a number of previous talks and so on, most of our life is a push and a pull between trying to seek out and acquire pleasurable sensations that we may not yet have, or scheming and planning how we are going to get them. And if we do get them, holding onto them. And then when they change, we get disappointed or frustrated or despondent and so on, depending on how much attachment we had to that. And in the same way, we're trying to push away unpleasant or painful sensations that come to us. And we're scheming and planning how we can prevent those unpleasant sensations coming in the future. And so if you really examine it, probably 90% or 95% of our mental energy is spent in this pursuit of thinking and trying to gain pleasurable feelings, whether it's just, wanting to have a pleasant, tasty meal. So you get your favorite ingredients and you want to have a tasty meal or playing your favorite music, and other types of, things that we do or consume that we're hoping that brings us some kind of a pleasurable feeling. And that's because it helps to mask over the unpleasant feelings that we're also experiencing in a continual process. And so in order to get away from the painful feelings, we develop more desire and craving for pleasurable feelings. And so this push and pull between pleasure and pain, it's a never-ending process for most people. And it's really a dead-end street. And it's a source of suffering. And so that's why it's because of impermanence that actually there's suffering. Because we cannot control the flow of the world, and we cannot control even these feelings with the external world. We can't control even bodies, or even control our feelings and thoughts for the most part. So that's why, because of impermanence, this unsatisfactoriness, sometimes suffering is defined as unsatisfactoriness. Because, sure, you might get some pleasure and enjoy things for a while, but because of its impermanence, it's going to change. And either it changes because it's either been reached the end of its lifespan, if it's because of, say, human beings, or it gets killed, or it's somehow, it disappears, stolen, burned, destroyed in some way, or our mind changes and we lose interest in that object, and then we want some other object. So that's why the process of impermanence, that's why the Buddha says, because of impermanence, there's the suffering. And that's why the sequence of anicca, dukkha, anatta, and the insights normally come in that way also. Because if we don't see impermanence, then we won't see suffering really, or we will see suffering, but we won't know how to transcend it. We won't know how to weaken the grip that it has, because as we understand in the second noble truth, it's our craving and desire, which includes aversion, being caught in that push and pull between pleasure and pain is what is essential. And the karma that we create in the process of that, creates most of the suffering that we experience. So that's why the insight into impermanence is normally the opening toward understanding the suffering, and especially the mental suffering. And as we continue to meditate, we understand that, that all these things are happening because of the power of the past karma. And really, there's nobody that really can control it. And we think there's an owner. We think we are the owner of our experiences, the owner of our body. But on the external level, there may seem to be an owner. But on the internal level, the subtler mental process, we see that, the idea of an owner is, an illusion. And so, this was actually the Buddha's deductive reasoning. The Buddha, as I mentioned before, he approached the Dhamma in a scientific attitude, not proposing some theory that, okay, the earth or the world was created at a certain time and just taking that for face value. But he had a scientific attitude of how, the nature of reality. So he approached it as a scientist. And he had this, through his insights, he developed this deductive reasoning, which he illustrated in the Anattalakkhana Sutta, which is actually a sutta I'm going to go over on next Wednesday night. So he was giving a talk to a group of monks. And so he asked the monks, what do you think? Is form, feeling, perception, volition, and consciousness, it's the 5 aggregates, or he started one at a time, is form permanent or impermanent? Meaning form of the material body and the things around them. And they said, impermanent, Venerable Sir. Naturally, they're impermanent. Now he got them. Okay, they've admitted form is impermanent. So then he asked the second question. Well, if something is impermanent, is that something to be secure with? Does that provide security? Is that a source of one's happiness? Or does it produce suffering? And then they thought about it a moment and they said, yeah, it's a suffering because it's impermanent. We can't hold on to it. It's suffering. Now he's getting them into a corner. And then he says, well, if form is impermanent and produces a lot of suffering, is it right to call it that is myself? Or this is me, this is mine, this is myself? If you cannot control these things and they cause suffering, how can you call it yourself? And so they, kind of thought about it. And so they said, no, Venerable Sir, it's not right to call it myself. If I can't control it, because it stands to reason, if you call something yourself, you should be the owner of it. You should be the controller of it. But the fact that we cannot control it, and we really don't own it. And because we cannot control it, then we don't really own it. So anyway, this was the way that the Buddha kind of used his deductive reasoning and thinking along the causal lines of cause and effect. So those are the anicca, dukkha, and anatta is applied to the 5 aggregates, because the 5 aggregates basically comprise everything in the external or even in the internal world. So the easiest thing is to understand impermanence, but not only external impermanence, you have to understand the internal impermanence. That means the impermanence of our mental states that are constantly changing, and our mind is very fickle. And of course, we've been conditioning our mind our whole life. And all the feelings that are constantly changing in us, and our thoughts and our emotional states. And largely they come on their own. They arise and pass away due to causes and conditionings. And most of that is because of the past habits and conditionings of our mind that we've been cultivating ever since we were born. And to some extent, even coming from the past lives. So this is where really the practice of meditation plays its most important part. So we might understand anicca, dukkha, and anatta on the intellectual level, but that won't be enough sort of impetus or motivation to actually make the effort toward wanting to, do something about the mind. In other words, we have to understand the internal level of the suffering. As I mentioned, there's not much we can do about the external level of suffering, but how the mind is working to create this suffering on the inner or mental level, which is the real deeper meaning of the teaching. I mean, you wouldn't need a Buddha. If there was only external suffering, you wouldn't need a Buddha to come around. But it's because you can't do anything about external suffering. That's the nature of the conditioned world. And there's nothing really you can do much about it. And a lot of that suffering of the external world nowadays is caused, by the behavior of human beings over the last few hundred years in terms of, causing changes to the environment and things like that, that in turn create suffering to us as diseases associated with pollution or eating, chemical food, added foods, and all kinds of things, and other, smoking and drugs and so many things. So only when the internal level of the mind is changed can we really even maybe affect the external world. But anyway, so the practice of meditation is what we use for trying to understand anicca and dukkha and anatta at a deeper level. And especially the four foundations of mindfulness and the Vipassana meditation are the Buddha's specific methods for developing this direct type of observation and deepening of awareness to observe our mind in this process of impermanence, the suffering and no self on the internal level or within the mind. And so that's what I wanted to, begin talking about also, even though I have talked about these things already in the past to a certain extent. But, in the four foundations of mindfulness, the Buddha chose the body as the starting point. And, there's reasons for that. In the Theravada teachings especially, there's many lists of different qualities that you find, like the Four Noble Truths, the Noble Eightfold Path, Four Foundations of Mindfulness, the Five Spiritual faculties, the 7 factors of enlightenment. And if you examined all those lists, there's an order to them. They're not just sort of haphazard. So the first ones mentioned in each list go from the sort of the easiest one to cultivate, or each one leads to the next one. And understanding or recognizing suffering, then you try to understand the cause of it, the cessation, and the way leading to the cessation of suffering. So anyway, in the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the body is chosen because it's the closest thing to us. And there's different aspects to developing mindfulness of the body. But as I have mentioned before, the Buddha used this body as his laboratory. And after going around and trying to learn meditation and Dhamma from different teachers, he wasn't satisfied with their teachings. And he thought, well, let me just sit down and look within myself and discover the truth, for myself. So he used this body as a laboratory and started looking into it. And so the first stage of meditation is actually learning how to get the mind connected back to the body, because this body is the home or the external shell for our mind. And basically, our mind operates off of the sensory data that are coming through our senses, and that trigger off all of our mental thoughts and reactions to those objects. So basically, the experience of the world happens through this body with its nervous system and brain and mental processes, as we'll try to see as we go on. So, the first stage of meditation is basically, our mind normally is wandering in the past and future, lost in its thoughts. And very rarely are we sort of grounded and connected in the present moment with the body, like really aware of the body and feeling it. Because again, most of the time we're lost in our thoughts. The mind is in the past or the future. And the mind is like a pendulum. It's always swinging back and forth. Tick, tock, tick, tock. And a clock keeps going, right? What happens if the clock stops? The pendulum stops in the middle. Huh? Time stops, right? So time is created through the mind moving between past and future. And that's what it's doing most of the time. Most people have never really brought their mind to the present moment and were able to hold it there for any length of time to really get any insight out of it. And so the first stage of meditation is to bring the mind to get it centered in the present moment, because the body is always in the present moment. It's always just here, right? It's sitting, it's standing, it's walking, it's laying down, it's breathing. Blood is pulsing through your arteries. Other sensations are going on. All these sensations are going on continuously since the moment you were born, the moment you died. But basically they're occurring in the present moment. So we try to feel that, we use those as objects of concentration, such as the breathing. And we're trying to bring our mind out from the, its focus in the external world, or lost in the internal world of thoughts, worries, fears, and so on. So we have that object of concentration, such as the breathing, to get centered in the body. And so the body is actually the middle path, in being centered in the body, which is in the present moment, so we can see things clearly. So that's one aspect, and why the Buddha chose mindfulness of the body to start with, because it's the natural connection to the present moment. You know, it's our only connection to the present moment, because our mind is within this body. And it's always right here. So by remembering what the body is doing in the present moment, that's the beginning of mindfulness. And it's the beginning of learning how to bring the attention back into the center to get grounded and focused. And to me, that's one of the most important aspects of mindfulness of the body, although there's some other ones too, in terms of seeing how the body is impermanent and it's constantly changing. And so as you are developing mindfulness and concentration, as you get centered in the body for longer periods of time without the mind wandering to the past or future, then you start feeling more sensations in the body. So we use like the breathing for one of our main objects of attention. You know, we start feeling the subtle movements of the breathing, the subtle sensations connected with the breathing, and it helps to hold our attention inside, where we can feel the various, so many different sensations. You know, we feel the internal energy vibrations of the body. And we can notice different sensations just arising and vanishing. But we can notice how our in-breath begins, lasts a second or two, and then stops. And then the out-breath begins, lasts a second or two, and then stops. So that's the beginning in training our attention to impermanence. That, you know, even the breathing process is impermanent. And so we train our attention to just see how quickly the different sensations of the expanding in-breath are changing, the contracting out-breath are changing. And as we're noticing that, we feel other sensations, you know, around there also that are coming and going, maybe a little itch on your shoulder or a little pain on your side, and, you know, and as we're holding the attention, developing a more continuous concentration, we start to feel more and more sensations. And then we can contemplate or also understand that this body, this, you know, first of all, there's this external body. But then even as the science tells us, the body is just comprised of many cells and molecules and atoms that I mentioned before. But then but that was, before that was kind of intellectual. But now when you focus your attention there and you start feeling how many different sensations that are being noticed coming and going, you start to feel sensations all over, you know, on your face and head, on your foot and legs, your arms, you know, as you develop concentration, as you're able to hold the attention there, you start to feel more and more sensations coming and going. And so you can apply this understanding that what are these sensations? Well, basically they're just the cells and molecules that are, you know, moving and vibrating and interacting with each other in the process of life that's producing all these different sensations. And so this is a part of like reflective understanding. So, you know, we might have read that intellectually, but now as you've gained some concentration and you're not so distracted, you've overcome some of the hindrances like, you know, drowsiness or sleepiness that prevents you from staying alert and awake. And the momentum of your thoughts have slowed down. So now you're able to feel more and more. So the Buddha has us actually go through the body and contemplate like the four elements, or even all the body parts. In this body, there's, hair of the head, skin, nail, teeth, and then all the various organs. And you reflect how they're, we can easily see how they're also always changing. And they're also just made up of cells, molecules, and atoms that are constantly changing. And so, and as we get more concentrated, we feel that more kind of intimately. It's like turning up the power of a microscope. So actually the concentration, the longer you can hold your attention without being distracted by the hindrances, to keep it focused in the body, it's like turning up the power of a microscope. And you start to see more and more details of that. And that's how you begin to develop the insight into the deeper level of anicca, or impermanence, on the inner level, that this body is in a constant state of change and flux. And then not only the body, but you also then, because the body is basically just the mass of sensations. So, the physical body is that first of the five aggregates. But this body is continually producing all these sensations that we experience. And the sensations of the four elemental sensations of hardness, fluidity, temperature, motion. These are basically just the vibrations of and how the cells and molecules and so on are interacting and producing sensation. And we identify these as being, this body, my leg, my arm, and so on, my eye. And these sensations have the quality of being some are pleasurable and some are painful. The longer we sit, you might experience more painful sensations. And normally we try to get rid of the painful sensations, but and we get irritated by the sensations. We want to change our posture, and we're always trying to itch or rub this or that irritating sensation, and trying to get rid of these sensations, because that's what our habit is, even in our daily life. And so when you actually meditate, in the beginning, there's more painful sensations than there are pleasant sensations, because there's painful sensations of our mind also, because you're getting angry, because you can't concentrate, you get upset and frustrated because you can't concentrate, your thoughts are changing too much, and you get frustrated with the body, that there's so many aches and pains coming from different places. And really, you can't really, you try to control them, but you can't really. So, you begin to understand the nature of dukkha also, at a more deeper level. So, the five aggregates are really the subject of the impermanence and suffering and no self, as we've already mentioned. But so as you're feeling the body and you're using the body as your initial object of concentration, you can't avoid the mind, because the mind is what is reacting to the body. And you can see how the mind affects the body, and the body affects the mind. So you start to begin to see that process again at this more deeper, intimate level. As you've turned up the power of the mental microscope, you can even see, subtler types of painful and pleasant sensations, and you can see the thoughts that are triggered off by those sensations, because most of our thoughts are triggered off by the sensations, worrying, or thoughts of attachment or aversion, or worrying, fear about what these sensations are going to do to you, especially the painful ones. So that's the way that we gradually develop our insights, and with each of those, so to get centered in the body gives you the front row seat to observe the Vedanas, or the various painful, pleasant, and neutral sensations that are coming through the body. And it's the sensations that trigger off our mental reactions and thoughts and reactions. So as you're feeling the body, you have a front row seat to understand these, to directly feel these sensations and what effect that they're having on your mind. So the feelings trigger off the perceptions. That means our memory and mental pictures of what these various sensations represent. Like you hear a sound and you say, "Oh, that's a bird chirping." I mean, your eyes are closed, so what's really coming through is sound through the ear, and maybe it's a pleasant sound or a painful one. But the mind remembers that, and then what it is, and then it starts thinking about it, either for or against it, or other imaginings. So as the mind is held steady in the body, we can see this domino effect of the mental process, that the sensations in the body give rise to these painful or pleasant feelings. And then it's the mind that reacts to those pleasant and painful feelings and wants to either get them or to reject them, and causes more thoughts and body movements. So those are the volitional formations, like an urge to scratch. You have an itch in your face, you can see that urge to want to scratch. So the mind, making the hand lift up to scratch, that's a volitional formation. That urge leads to the actual volition, or to do the movement. And then it's the sense of self and I that is the sort of the cause of that, because it's the I that wants to get rid of that unpleasant feeling, or it's the I that wants to hold on to the pleasant feeling. And that's the sense of self, or the sense of I or me, that's believes that it's the doer. But as we've talked about before, the sense of I is something that has been created within the consciousness since just after the time of birth. And the sense of I is not any permanent aspect of our awareness. It's just a conditioned phenomenon. Basically, it's kind of just another thought in the mind that arises with the mental process at each moment. And again, this process is happening basically all by itself. And that's, again, how the Buddha came up and understood this idea of no self, is that, here you're sitting there and, you want to concentrate. So you focus your attention on the breathing. But in spite of that, all these other distractions come. You get sleepy. You don't want to sleep, but you might get sleepy. Or you start thinking about the past and the future. You want to concentrate, but yet the mind has its own agenda. So depending on whatever reasons, it's so many various types of thoughts arise. Or you want to sit peacefully, but all kind of pains, physical pains start coming into the body that distract you. So, you can't control that. You can't tell the body sit still and don't move and don't have any pain. Can you do that? Maybe in very advanced states of meditation, but normally not for the average person. So, we can't even control this body. So how can you call it yourself? And then you can't control the mind. And so, again, these are the ways that we reflect and we develop this idea that, if this body was really our own, we should be able to control these things, but we can't. Anyway, as you go on meditating and cultivating the 4 foundations of mindfulness, so that first foundation of mindfulness of the body, you're developing those 2 things. First is the understanding that the body's in a constant state of change, but using the body to hold the attention in the present moment. And also developing a detachment to the body. So there's kind of three things involved with mindfulness of the body. First, you're using it as an anchor to the present moment. And the second is you're developing insight into the nature of the subtler impermanence, the suffering, and no self. And the third one is you're becoming kind of a disillusioned with the body, or you're becoming kind of detached from it. And you're losing that infatuation with it, because you see how much suffering is connected with the body and trying to impress other people and making it beautiful and doing all the right things, but still, in the end, it's subject to old age, disease, and death. And, it could die from so many different causes, any time. And this is a perfect example of that during this pandemic situation. People thought that they were healthy. Some of them have died within a few days from this disease. And of course, from so many other things also. So all of these things is part of the cultivation of the Chintamaya Panya, that level of, second level of wisdom. But it depends on your observation of the impermanence. It's because of the impermanence that now you're seeing how quickly the body and mind mental processes are changing. And basically it's occurring by itself. At the most we can do is sort of manage it. We can manage it by practicing mindfulness, by practicing concentration. We can kind of slow the momentum of our erratic, neurotic thoughts and so on. And at some point we might be able to subdue them, but that's only temporary. And when you come out of meditation later on, then the mind starts, operating again in its conditioned way. So the contemplation of the body, again, is for those 3 ways of understanding. There's a connection to the present moment, because we're carrying the body around with us all the time. And then as the starting point for understanding impermanence and for accessing our mind. So this body is actually the doorway to our mind. That means our feelings, perceptions, volitional states, the thoughts and emotions that we can see more clearly as we gain our mindfulness and concentration. And the process of impermanence can be even taken to the sense of the self. The reason why we cling to our consciousness. Now, the consciousness is the 5th aggregate, and it's probably the hardest one to understand. So the 5 aggregates, again, they're the body, feelings, the perceptions, the volitions, and then the consciousness. So we've talked about these before, but with the consciousness is the hardest one to understand, how that is no self, because the sense of I is so strong. And people can understand their feelings and perceptions and volitions to some extent. But with the consciousness, it's a little bit more difficult to let that go. So again, that's why the five aggregates are mentioned in that order of form, feeling, perception, volition, and consciousness, because the form is the easiest one to feel. Feelings are the next one. Perceptions are even subtler than feelings. Mental volitions are even subtler than the perceptions. And then the feeling of the I that's actually doing these things or observing these things, or the meditator, is even subtler, is the most subtle. And that's why it's very difficult to be able to see that. And I'm going to talk more about this later in the process of the Vipassana meditation, but how we understand no self even through the development of the Vipassana meditation and the perception of impermanence. That we think the ego is something kind of permanently stable within our mind, but it's because we don't see how it's also consciousness is changing from moment to moment. So all the five aggregates actually come together in each moment of hearing, seeing, tasting, smelling, touching, and thinking, according to the Buddhist psychology. These five aggregates come together. When you hear a sound, that means the sound is the material vibration. And then that sound is felt as something painful, pleasant, or neutral. And you remember that sound as being, bird chirping, a dog barking, somebody talking, a car going down the road. That's a perception. It's a mental image that pops into the mind based on these vibrations. And then you react to them depending on the past karma, how you've reacted in the past with like, dislike, wanting, rejecting. We react, which is the volitional formations or the thoughts that are triggered off by that, fear, worry, anxiety, and the emotions. And then the sense of I that believes that these things are happening to me. So even identification with our mind. But these things come together in one moment and pass away. Now we can see how form, sensations, feelings, perceptions, and volitions come and go fairly easily. But the coming and going of consciousness, because it's so subtle, it's very difficult to see that. And so there's a has been developed in Vipassana meditation. There's a specific system of mental development, which is specifically designed for trying to tune in to actually see how each moment, mind moment, arises and vanishes. But that's a whole another process in itself that we'll try to go over in another talk. But so I just wanted to kind of just introduce the subject of anicca, dukkha, and anatta. I know many of you, of course, you've heard this before many times, and many of you have been practicing meditation, and you understand it. But there's many levels to that understanding, and as we mentioned, 3 levels of understanding: intellectual level, and then the reflective level that also includes the initial meditation, so developing the initial stages of mindfulness and concentration. and weakening the hindrances. And then you can even use these topics. You can use the topic as a thinking meditation. So even in the 4 foundations of mindfulness that we'll cover maybe in one of the sutta classes, that it involves a use of discursive thinking and right thought also. The second step of the Eightfold Path can also be used actually while you are meditating in developing a kind of directed thinking toward what you are experiencing. But it's thinking not about the past or future, it's thinking about the present moment changes that are occurring within your body-mind experiences. Like thinking about the 5 aggregates, it's trying to identify, oh, that's form, oh, that's a feeling, that's a perception, it's a volition. So you get familiar, you get used to kind of watching and identifying the mental states that are, coming and going in your body and mind. Because if we can't do that, then that's why normally we get trapped by them, and then we get carried away by them, and affected by them, and causes suffering. So anyway, I think I'm going to bring this talk to an end now, because we still want to have some time for some questions. If there's any chats, it doesn't look like anybody has been writing any questions down. There is one. If somebody else wants to write a question down, we can spend a few minutes with. So here's a question. How can we develop our recognition of dukkha in pleasant experiences? So that's a very good question, because the term dukkha, even though it's translated as suffering, sometimes other translators have translated as unsatisfactoriness. So that means the conditioned world is unsatisfactory. It's not necessarily suffering, but because it's unsatisfactory and it cannot be relied upon as any stable happiness, that's why they would call it unsatisfactory, or we'd call it a source of suffering. So it's not that they're suffering, but it's the source of the suffering, because we have attachment and aversion. So that's why when all attachment and aversion has been overcome, then that's dukkha nirodha. That's the end of suffering. So suffering and pain is one thing, suffering is another thing. So even the pleasant experience that you have, you see it, you can see that desire to hold it, and then you try to hold it, and then it changes anyway. And so we see it as suffering because you cannot have it as long as you like. So it causes some kind of disappointment. Maybe not downright suffering, but it causes some disappointment. You'd like to have it, but it changed. And then you have to have some other object, because one object of your pleasant experience changes. The mind lives off of pleasant experience. Our whole life evolves around pleasant experiences. That's why all the 5 senses, people are driven to get pleasurable feelings from them. That's why they, have sex and other things, to experience these pleasant erotic sensations that might come up through these kind of experiences. Or, through the pleasant smells, agreeable smells, tastes, touches. They like to hug and, caress their friends. They get pleasant feelings from that. And even our pleasant thoughts, we like to have fantasies, entertain fantasies. And then looking for pleasurable objects and avoiding unpleasant, ugly things. So a whole life revolves around trying to get these pleasurable experiences. And because we know pain, we want more pleasurable experiences to mask over the painful experiences that we have. So understanding this phenomenon is a very important part of understanding the mind. So it's because the pleasant experiences are impermanent and changing. That's why they're called dukkha. And they can never be satisfied because of their impermanence. So we might get an object of our desire, a pleasant sensation, but it quickly changes. And then we want something else. So that's why craving can never be satisfied, because everything is changing. So when one thing no longer gives us satisfaction, we jump to the next one. And because that's changing, we jump to the next one. We want to build up a bank account of pleasurable things to have. So we have all these various toys and other things that give us a plan B and C and D. If plan A falls, but they all fall back to some pleasurable experiences. If I can't go to the Caribbean for my vacation, I'll go to Bali, or I'll go somewhere else. Or if this doesn't person work out, I got another person. So the mind is always, that's its whole life revolves around. But it's a futile existence, and it's not satisfactory because it can never be satisfied. So that is another meaning of dukkha. And that's why when the mind it finally overcomes the being caught between pleasure and pain and resides in the present moment, and develops that connection with the present moment is the only thing that doesn't change. Objects are changing within the present moment, but present moment awareness doesn't change. Objects are changing, but the awareness itself is the eternal, is the deathless state. So that's why that's the only thing that's stable. And that's even more pleasant than any kind of sensual, pleasurable feeling can give you. But that can only be experienced in meditation, and you can't think about that really. You only have to develop the right ways to meditate and contemplate that eventually will allow you to see that and develop that present moment awareness. Again, it's the middle path, it's the mind that's resting in the middle between both pleasure and pain. Even though you're experiencing pleasure and pain, the mind is not caught and disturbed by that. Can you recommend any techniques for being with chronic pain, like joint pain during meditation, when focusing on awareness of the body? Well, focus on some other pains that are not so chronic. So sure, at any one time, there's probably 5 or 10, 15 or different sensations that we could probably be feeling, but the strongest painful ones grab our attention the most. And because we cling to our body, we think that this pain is in this my knee, and this knee is part of this body, and this body belongs to me. That is the evolution of suffering. It's this step-by-step process. First, you feel a pleasant pain. The mind identifies it as being a pain over here on the left side, in some part of the body, as I mentioned, the left knee. And then this left knee is part of the body. This body belongs to me. That is created within our memory and thought process. And so it's the me that struggles, because you're clinging to that thought of me and I. There's a struggle against it. If there's just sensation without any I or me there, then there's no struggling, and it doesn't really bother you too much. It may still be there in the background, but it's not disturbing your connection to that deeper level of tranquility. So you know, it's like, you know, if you have a pain of, you know, 8 or 9 or 10, a real strong pain, you know, try to focus on a pain of 6 or 7 somewhere else. If you have a pain on your right side, you know, scan the left side. See if you can find a pain that's, you know, painful that'll hold your attention, but not so painful than the 8 or 9 level pain. And then if you can keep your attention on that 6 or 7 level pain, you'll forget about the larger one. And then you can go from there down to a 3 or 4 level pain. And that's the way you can gradually learn to tolerate. It's because we don't have a greater awareness, so we've allowed our mind to latch on to a particular sensation. But there's so many other sensations in the body we could feel that are not so painful. And if you can, you know, feel many more of those on the other side, that'll pull some of the attention away from that pain and allow it to be more tolerable until finally it may change or disappear on its own. So this is a way that I recommend people to doing it. Otherwise, you know, other than that, you better take a lot of Tylenol or something else. But there's not going to be any way that you can overcome that pain if you keep on allowing your mind to just focus only on that. There's so many other parts of the body you can feel. Feel your eyes, feel the subtle pulsation in your fingertips. These are some pleasant sensations. And that'll pull some of that energy out of that painful spot. And so it'll help to be more tolerable. So I recommend working with that kind of a process, if you like, and see if that helps you. Is anicca, is impermanence the primary cause of dukkha? No, the dukkha is the attachment to the objects of impermanence, is the clinging. But it's one of it's our attachment is the cause of the dukkha. You can have things changing, but if there's no attachment to it and you don't care about it, you just let them come and go. You're not trying to keep them, you're not trying to push them away, then that's the end of suffering, at least on a certain level, on the weakening the mental suffering. Actually, this is there's a formula for suffering. I euphemistically call it the Buddha's formula, mathematical formula for suffering, although the Buddha never mentioned it. And this is a formula that a friend of mine, Shinzen Young, had come up with. Somebody I lived in a meditation center with back in the 70s. Anyway, it's similar to Einstein's theory of relativity, but it's S equals P times R. So S equals suffering. So S equals P times R. P stands for pain. R stands for resistance. So suffering equals pain times resistance. And so we have a pain someplace. And we could say, okay, let's say it's a pain of 5. And then we can observe the mind struggling with it. And maybe it's not struggling a lot, maybe it's struggling with, say, struggling of 5. In terms of, 1 to 10, intense struggling, and hatred is a 10, and not caring about it is 1. So let's say there's a pain of 5 and a resistance of 5. So what is your suffering? 5 times 5, right? 25. So that's a lot of suffering. But if you have the same pain of 5 with a resistance of only 1, what is the suffering then? It's only a number 5. So the suffering has been reduced 5-fold, from 25 to 5, because of the reduction of the resistance. And then if you have a pain of 5 and a resistance of 0, then what is your suffering? It's zero. So in that formula, really that's Buddhism in a nutshell. You know, if you could understand that, you could attain liberation from suffering, basically. So it's the resistance to the suffering. And a resistance means either attachment or aversion, and ignorance about what the nature of the mind is. So it's that is the, you know, the primary cause of, again, of this, and this is stated in the Four Noble Truths, that craving, that means attachment, is the cause of the suffering. So pain is a given. There's always going to be pain in our life. That's something that basically you don't care for necessarily. But suffering is the mental reaction to it. But if the mind is resting in the present moment and opens up and it lets those vibrations kind of just waft in and out, back and forth, but without the mind closing in on them, then the suffering is going to be released. But it's because we identify all these things as me and mine. These are my feelings. These are my thoughts. These are my minds. These are my memories. These are my emotions. My, I, me, mine. I, me, mine, mine. Always going on in our mind all the time on a subtle level. And that's why, you know, that anatta is actually the deepest level of insight. And when one understands that, then one understands everything else, basically. Okay. Okay, looks like that's about all the questions. So yeah, those were good questions. And so now we are going to have a short break. And for those who want to stay for the meditation, then let's take a few minutes of break to use the restroom, drink some water. And then we're going to come back, and as we've done before, I'll lead you through a few stretches before we sit for our guided meditation. And those who are living over in Germany and other parts of the world where it's very late at night, if you want to take your rest, we understand that. And so take your rest, and we'll see you perhaps next Wednesday or next Sunday again. Okay, so we'll take a short little break, just a few minutes, and come back. So we're going to start some few stretches now. We'll try to find a place where you'll be able to move your arms up and down a bit. So to stand straight, relax your arms and hands at the sides. Feel your feet pressing the floor. Just mentally feel the standing body. Then begin taking some deep, slow breaths. It's going to take 3 seconds to slowly breathe in, expanding your abdomen, rib cage, and upper chest. Hold the air in the lungs 2 or 3 seconds. And slowly breathe out. We're going to coordinate these movements with that deep, slow breathing. We do the movement while breathing in, holding the position, and then returning to the starting point on the out breath, and repeating each movement 3 times. A little longer pause before going on to the next one. So the whole time, just try to keep your attention focused, feeling the body and the sensations generated by the breathing and the body movement. Just using the body to help hold the attention in the present moment. So on the next in breath, raise the arms over the head, interlock the fingers, turn the palms up, straighten the arms, stretch your head back to look up at the back of the hands, stretch upwards. On the out breath, turn the palms down and touch the top of the hip. And again, the in breath, the palms up, straighten the arms, stretch upwards, the head back. Out breath, touch the top of the head. Once more, in breath. Stretch up, just feel the sensation. Hold it a little longer. Now release the fingers, the out breath, arms back to the sides. And relax. Just gently close the eyes. Feel your feet pressing the floor. Feel the arms and hands hanging at the sides. Feel the clothing touching the skin on different places. Feel the head balanced on top of the neck. And just mentally remember standing, standing. It's the present moment of the body. Just letting go of your thoughts. Just letting thoughts come and go in the back of the mind. It's just like meditation. Now the next exercise on an in-breath, push up onto the balls of the feet while raising the arms over the head, face the palms of the hands toward each other about 6 inches apart, with your biceps close to your head. On the out breath, come back down, arms to the side, heels back to the floor. Use the breathing to help lift and lower the body as you breathe in, like filling up a helium balloon, and it rises upwards. Stretch. Out breath. Feel the sensations. Once more, in breath, up. Out. Just relax. Just try to feel the whole body, feel the gradual increase in body vibration sensations, being the activated life force, vibration of the cells, with that oxygenated blood being distributed through the movements. Just try to feel that subtle vibration, sensation. Subtle tingling sensation, pulsation, increased heartbeat. Just remember standing, 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 present moment of the body. First stage of mindfulness. Okay, next on an in-breath, raise both arms up in front. Try to keep the fingers and the arms straight, close to the head. And on the out breath, bend over the right side as far as you comfortably can. Feel that stretch inside. In breath, lift up. Then the other side, the out breath. In breath up. Again to the right, out breath. In. Once more to each side, out breath to the right. The out breath, lower both arms. Relax. Keep the attention in the body. Don't let it rush to the past or future. Feel the feet pressing the floor. The arms and hands at the side. Clothing touching the skin on different places. Head balanced on top. Standing. 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 Feeling that organic aliveness to the body. Parallel universe under the skin. Inner world. You now lightly press the front of your legs with the palms and fingers. And on an in-breath, turn the palms outward, bring them together at the chest, and raise the hands over the head as you breathe in. Stretch the head back and arch your lower spine, bend back a little bit, not too far. And on the out breath, bring the hands back to the chest and straighten up a bit. And the hands back to the sides. Touch the front of the legs, all on the out breath. And again, in breath, palms outward, together at the chest, over the head. Stretch the head back, arch backwards a bit. Feel the sensation. Out breath, hands to the chest, back to the sides. Touch the front of the legs. And once more, in breath. Out. Relax. Start to feel the whole body. Whole body awareness. Start to get the sense of the standing body and feet pressing the floor underneath, the arms and hands at the sides. Clothing touching the skin in the middle, head on top. Kind of in one glance, like you're looking in the mirror. Not as a visual image, just a collection of sensations. That's why they call it the aggregate of forms, just an aggregate, a collection of many millions of different sensations. I identify as my body. Sort of feel that organic aliveness under the skin. on the surface of the skin. Okay. So now come back to your seat, take up your meditation pose. Friends, I'm going to be turning off my video so that you're not tempted to want to open your eyes, look at me during the meditation to see if I'm falling asleep or scratching my face or something. So we're going to be doing, I'm going to lead you through a body scanning meditation today. Because that's a good method of meditation, or once after getting centered in the body, to kind of move the attention from the toes up to the top of the head, trying to feel the sensations in the different parts of the body, to begin that observation of impermanence, with the idea of understanding that all these sensations you're feeling is just thousands, millions of cells and molecules that are vibrating, interacting, keeping this body alive, but that's what you're actually feeling, is all these subtler inner sensations coming and going, or any sensations on the surface of the skin. Helps to develop both concentration and a deep awareness. So just try to sit, keeping the back and the head straight in a straight line. First of all, just feel the weight of the body, the buttocks and the feet pressing the floor underneath. Feel the way the legs are bent underneath. If you're sitting on a chair, the feet flat on the floor. And feel your arms and hands. Feel your hands touching together, fingers. Feel the upper arms hanging from the shoulders. Feel the clothing touching the skin on different places. We're just feeling the outer body. And feel the head balanced on top of the neck. Try to keep the chin lifted up, level, parallel with the floor. Feel your face. Feel some sensations on your face, like little prickling sensations. The skin stretched over the skull. Feel the eyes and the sockets. And the eyelids stretched over the eyeball. If you can, just try to mentally feel now, let the awareness expand to feel the outline of the sitting body. The general sense of the buttocks and feet underneath, arms and hands, the sides, the middle, the head on top. And take a few deep, slow breaths. So feeling the outer body is like coming to the door of the laboratory. The outer body is the door of the laboratory. And do some deep, slow breathing to help draw the attention inward. And after breathing in, feel the expanding and contracting sensations of the abdomen, rib cage, and upper chest. Hold the air in the lungs several seconds to feel a subtle surge of oxygenating blood sensation. And feel the relaxing contractions of the out breath. Riding the contracting out breath down to the in to feel the last bit of air go out. Just try to take a few more deep, slow breaths like that. Oxygenate the blood. Keep the mind grounded on the body. Just thinking like this to yourself with a few more breaths. Breathing in, letting go of the past and future. Breathing out, sitting here and now. Breathing in, letting go of the past and future. Breathing out, sitting here and now. Now with the next out breath, just let go of the deep breathing and bring your total attention down to try to feel the buttocks pressing the floor. Feel that weight of the buttocks pressing the floor. Just to feel those sensations, sensation of hardness or pressure. Should be able to notice a couple different sensations. Maybe the pulse of blood in the buttocks. Really slight discomfort. And from that point at the buttocks, move the attention down to your toes. Try to focus on the toes of each foot or both of the feet together. Just try to feel some sensation in your toes. Maybe if you're wearing socks, rubbing on the skin. The subtle pulsation of blood, or just anything else. And just remember the toes. I'm going to repeat the body part a few times. Keep your attention focused in case it wanders in thought. Do not let the awareness expand to feel the rest of your feet, the arches and the heel of the feet. Just try to mentally isolate these body parts in the mind's eye, sort of the outline of the feet. Might feel more sensations, subtle pulsations, your heels or the arches. Just like turning up the power of a microscope. Staying focused on the feet. Feel that subtle aliveness. Maybe some itch or stinging sensation in the feet. Especially be alert to see some different sensations just sort of arise and vanish, come and go. And gradually let the awareness move upwards into the lower leg. Feel your calf muscle, or the shin bone. Still may feel the feet there in the background. Let's try to feel something in the lower leg. The clothing touching the surface of the skin. The sensation in the muscle tissue, blood pulsing. Or some unpleasant sensation, an itch, pain in the lower legs. Then moving upwards to the knees, feel the knee cap, that hard bone of the knee cap, where the clothing touches the skin of the kneecap, and the soft flesh behind the knee. Just thinking in terms of sensation, body sensation. Maybe there's some knee pain. And then moving upwards into the upper leg, or the thick flesh of the thigh. You're noticing whether the clothing rubs against the skin or within the muscle tissue. Just keep turning up the power of the mental microscope and notice more subtler sensation in the upper leg. And moving the intention up to feel the whole groin or pelvic area between the hips. Should be lots of sensation. You just try to think of that as just being cells, molecules or atoms vibrating, producing sensation. That's what you're actually feeling. The mind might call it the body part. That's a mental picture, a perception made from just pure sensation. And again, feel the buttocks pressing the seat. Might be some more unpleasant sensation from sitting longer, all that flesh being compacted onto your seat from the weight of the upper body. Maybe you feel some warmth. You start to feel the vibration of the whole lower body, including the buttocks, the legs, and the feet, and toes. See how many different sensations you can notice within that area of the lower body. Especially being alert for how certain sensations arise and vanish very quickly. Others seem to last longer. But even while they seem to last, they're also changing. It's developed this Chintamaya Panya, reflective wisdom. Of impermanence. And let the awareness move upwards to feel your hands and fingers where they touch together. So if you can notice the outline of different fingers or thumb, feel some subtle pulsation, vibration. The hands and fingers. Maybe feel some subtle warmth in the palms of the hand. Being the heat element. And let the awareness gradually move up into the lower arm, the forearm. Feel some sensations, clothing touching the outer skin of the forearm. Or any sensations under the skin. Pulse of blood in your wrists. The forearm. Then moving to the elbows. Feel those little bones of the elbow. Where the clothing touches the skin of the elbow. Then moving upwards to the upper arm, the bicep muscle. In feeling where the clothing touches the outer skin, or inside that bicep muscle. You notice any tension in your shoulders, relax the shoulders. So check the posture in between, starting to slouch or the head drooping downwards. Just mindfully straighten back up to keep the attention more alert. And now move the attention into the center of the body and take a few deep, slow breaths to begin to feel the sensations of your expanding rib cage and chest, clothing touching the skin of the rib cage and chest, or any sensations in that stomach or rib cage or chest. And after breathing in, hold the air in the lungs for a few seconds to feel that expanded chest, the sensations. And follow the contracting out breath all the way down to the end to feel the last bit of air go out through the lungs. Feel the brief pause and then the next in breath. It's because of this breathing that this body stays alive, feeding the cells of the body with life-giving blood. And focus in your chest, see if you can feel the heart beating, pumping out blood to your whole body. Feeling those pulsations in different places. Now moving the attention up to feel your neck, the outer neck. And gradually going in inside the throat. Throat and neck is a super highway that connects the head to the lower body. There's lots of traffic going up and down. Blood, water, air, food, electrical vibrations. Feel any sensations in the throat, like the urge to cough or swallow. And moving up to feel the lower jaw, and the gums and teeth in the lower jaw. Relax the lower jaw. Kind of move the attention out to the tip of the chin. Feel some sensation at the very tip of the chin. And feel the lips touching together. Maybe feel the teeth behind the lip. The tongue. Maybe the moistness from any saliva, the water element, the water vibration. Now feel the nose, the outer nose. A little subtle prickling sensation. And take a few more deep, slow breaths. See if you can feel the air flowing through the nostrils. You might even hear the sound of the air moving through the nostrils. If you're really closely mindful, you might notice a cool sensation of the colder outer air moving through into the nostrils, and as it comes out, it's a little warmer. Thousands of times per day, the air is moving in and out through the nostrils, keeping this body alive. We hardly ever know it. The silent inner world of the real life force, the flow of life. Now move the attention to the eyes, to feel the eyes and the sockets and the eyelids stretched over the eyeball. If you notice any subtle eye movements, relax the eyes. You might see some color or patterns behind the eyes, or some light, or maybe just black darkness. And now see if you can feel the ears, the outer ear. You might notice a kind of a subtle magnetized feeling around the ear. If you listen very closely, going inside the ear, feel the ear canal. You might even hear the subtle inner sounds, and the sounds of the brainwave activity. A very subtle, high-pitched, shrill sound like high-voltage electric wires. You now move the attention up to the top of the head. Feel the scalp where the hair comes out of the scalp. Then gradually converging to the very top of the head, the crown of the head, the size of a 25-cent piece. See if you can notice some subtle sensation in the crown chakra. You know, from that point at the top of the head, let the awareness kind of spread out downwards, back across the whole body. Try to establish whole body awareness. To feel the outline of the sitting body and all those different places we went over. The feet, legs, hands, arms, chest, head. Not in details, just the general sense of it. And just feeling some sensation from different places. Just try to hold that outline, sensation outline of the sitting body in the mind's eye. And just try to feel or open up to that organic aliveness of the whole body. The sitting, breathing body. The breathing is there in the middle of the body, but all around it, sensations could be noticed from the feet, legs, arms, head. Just understand this. All these sensations are just the vibrations of cells, molecules, and atoms. Which are essentially just pure energy. That's all you can really feel is just these organic material vibrations. The four elements of solidity, heat, fluidity, motion, air. Just develop this Chintamaya Panya, or reflective understanding. This body is just a mass of sensation. What we call the body is just a mass of so many sensations coming and going, arising and vanishing, in the flow of impermanence, the real impermanence. It's the microscopic arising and vanishing of the material sensation. And even while that is going on, you can notice thoughts and urges coming through the mind. What time is it? How long is it going to be? I want to stop. Feeling various pain. Maybe you feel very blissful, pleasant sensations. In the mind having reached a deep level of awareness. This is the real life, the flow of life from moment to moment. Cellular vibrations, sensory vibrations coming through the sense nervous system, thoughts, urges, wantings, going through the mind. And it's all happening in the present moment awareness through this expanded, larger, detached, present moment awareness. It's cultivating the first two levels of right understanding, of wisdom, the intellectual understanding of impermanence, and the deeper reflective direct cognition of impermanence. Some of those sensations are unpleasant or painful sensations, yet there are also pleasant sensations that can be observed or felt. Pleasing sensation of mental calmness, the blood pulsing through the arteries. Even pain and pleasure existing simultaneously. Could have a pain in a certain part of the body, but because you're feeling the subtler, pleasurable, subtle vibrations, the mind isn't so obsessed with the painful sensation. And just try to feel more of those subtle vibrations, pulsations. Take your attention away from painful sensation. But knowing that all those sensations are impermanent, you cannot control them. If you want to keep them or reject them, they don't care about what you want. They stay or go as they please. You don't own or control them. First realization of anatta. No owner or controller. To vibrations, feelings. Even your own thoughts are just coming and going. This is the right view. First stage of right understanding. What does that sound vibration do in the mind? Any thoughts aroused by that sound vibration? Sambi sankara anichati yada panyaya pasati atanibindati dukhi Isamango visuddhiya Nati janam apanyacha Anyanati ajaito Yami janancha panyacha Siri nibbana santiki Dukkha patta cha nidukkha Bhayapatta cha nibbaya Sokapatta cha nisoka Hontu sabbe pipanino all conditioned things, the five aggregates of this body, mind, and world are impermanent. When one sees this with the eye of wisdom, one becomes disenchanted with suffering. This is the path to purity. And there's no meditation without wisdom, no wisdom without meditation. One who both meditates and is wise is close to peace and freedom. And may the suffering be free from suffering. May the fear struck be free from fear. May the grieving be free from grief. In this way, may all beings live with mindfulness and wisdom. And thus spoke the Buddha. Now straighten up the body and take a deep, slow breath, filling up the lungs. And relax on the out breath. Actually place the hands at the edge of your knees. Take one more in breath. As you're breathing in, stretch the head back and pull the hands against the knees, arch backwards. Hold that a few moments. Feel the sensations. And lift the head up, and on an out breath, press the chin to the top of the stretch, the chest, to stretch the neck vertebrae. And lift the chin up level on an in breath. Then relax on the out breath. Okay, friends, so we covered a lot of ground. That talk and meditation practice. I hope you were able to kind of follow along with it. I know it might be not of it, all of it might not be that clear at the moment, but that's the direction that we're eventually working toward cultivating, that mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom, and understanding the anicca, dukkha, and anatta. Especially on the inner level. So I hope you all had at least a little bit of insights, and I'm glad all of you could join us. So we'll meet again on Wednesday nights. I'm doing the Sutta study class, and this Wednesday night we'll be covering some more suttas, some short suttas from the Samyutta Nikaya on the five aggregates, some different viewpoints, and also going over the Anatta Lakkhana Sutta again. And then next week with the Dhamma talk, kind of taking off from here, maybe going into the four foundations of mindfulness a little bit more. Okay, so I know it's late for a lot of you, so feel free, welcome to sign out when you need to, but if you want to hang on for a few minutes and